Hello, Internet! Welcome to episode 360 of the Assorted Calibers podcast, the Second Amendment podcast. There's a little bit for everyone. I'm Weer'd, and with me tonight, she is the greatest hostess in the entire universe, and under quite a bit of stress, as you can probably imagine, Aaron Paulette. How are you doing, Aaron?
Well, I'm under much less stress now, thank you. But pretty much all of the weekend was pretty darn stressful. Because, first we had the shooting, and then we had that Department of Justice leak, which we're going to talk about. And that was really a case of, oh God, please just make it stop. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's been rough, but I'm still hanging in there, and things are looking up. So, I may not be good, but I'm better. And that's a little English quirk that's going to show up in a blooper reel.
Isn't it now? Oh.
It is, because I mentioned it. You have to include it.
I was going to include it no matter what. It's just, it's a nice little reference for the cheap seats. Oh. Well, you know what?
So how are you? How are you doing, Weer'd?
I'm doing fine. I'm doing fine. We're recording this a day later, so I decided that today was going to be the day that I was going to get all my chores done. So I did. I did laundry. I went to the grocery store and I mowed the lawn. So that was. I've been running around like crazy, and my feet are sore. I tried walking around the lake. My feet are doing a lot better. I've got the plantar fasciitis, and I'm been slowly recovering. Every day's a little bit better than the next, and I'm like, I think I've got it. I've been walking about 2 miles a day, and that seems to be like the magic number to get everything stretched out. And I said, all right, I'm walking around the lake today, and it's like 3.25 miles. And I thought, oh, that'll be fine. And I'm like walking, and I'm like, it's good. And it's like the last bit was like, I was almost ready for it. So we'll take it easy for the rest of the week, and we'll try again later. But let's see. Well, we obviously the main topic is going to be about the DOJ leak. So, but let's we got a few other news stories to get out of the way. You ready to tackle those, Aaron? As
ready as I'm going to be.
All right. So first up, this one, it's a pretty simple story, and it makes a ton of sense. Is many of the families of the victims of the Lewiston shooting in Lewiston, Maine, are suing the U.S. Army because they really didn't do enough to prevent the shooter from getting guns. He was known to the Army for having mental issues, and they think he didn't do enough. And I would also argue that I'm trying to remember if it was the Maine state police, or if it was, I think it was the Lewiston police, were the ones that he was issued a yellow flag order, and they showed up at his house, and his car was there, and likely he was inside, but they knocked on the door and he didn't answer the door, and they thought that was good enough, and they went home and called it a day, and did not attempt to reserve or encounter him in any way, shape, or form to get him to give up his guns. So I will just say that this is other shades of Parkland, where the FBI paid out, I think it was $4 million to the various survivors of that shooting, because they did very little to stop the shooter.
Mm-hmm. This article doesn't list the payout, unless I missed it.
No, they filed the lawsuit, so it hasn't yet gone to court.
Yeah, so it is. Well, that tells you my mental state right here. Woo.
So we shall see. Likely it won't go to court. Likely there will be a settlement. Just we'll see how long that takes.
Mm-hmm. Normally suing the government doesn't do well, but considering that there is ample proof that the Army screwed up, and as a result, 18 people died. They probably just want to settle it quickly and get this massive PR debacle out of the public eye.
Mm-hmm. So, next up in other news, and this one is one that actually got the settlement, is New York is ordered to pay $800,000 to a church that sued them on their ban on firearms in houses of worship. And so this is going after the post NYSERPA snooty bill. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, the Concealed Carry Improvement Act.
Fine, you're going to make us give guns to everyone? Fine, we'll gut concealed carry.
Yes, everywhere is a sensitive place.
And they included houses of worship, and that has been that has been struck down in the courts, and they've been ordered to pay their legal fees. So this is actually awesome, especially since there's actually a number of places, especially down south, that restrict carry to in houses of worship. And it's pretty stupid. I mean, it's as bad.
Yeah,
as
because nobody has ever shot up a church in the history of ever, Weer'd.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
settlement,
or the school shootings were exceedingly rare until we passed the Gun-Free School Zone Act.
I'm just going to say that both sides of the political extremes believe in magical thinking. It's just a question of which magical thinking they believe in. But it is good that this church won, and now they are able to have concealed carriers lawfully carrying their gun for defense of themselves or others during church service. And that's fantastic. Because I know that when I go to church, I'm carrying.
And there's, of course, David, who I don't think is actually sat. I don't know if they call them pews. What you call the benches you sit in temple? But I don't think David has actually been to temple, at least for the service, in quite some time, because his job is to sit out in the parking lot and just keep an eye on things. And
has he told the story about the woman who asked if he had like a noisemaker to signal trouble?
Yes, he has. I was actually just going to reiterate that one as well. So if you see any trouble, do you have any sort of noisemaker or something to alert people? Goes, oh yeah, we've got noisemakers. All right, next up. And this one is super interesting.
I'm glad you think so, because I'm starting to read the legal documents, and normally that's not hard, but today it was just. So I'm glad you think it's interesting, and so you can do the heavy lifting here.
Yeah, well, it's just simply that the DOJ has essentially certified. So there's like the case. Let's see, what's the it's Kwame v. Barnett. It is essentially a case against Illinois' assault weapons ban, and the DOJ has requested to participate in the oral arguments on behalf of the plaintiff. So they are actually speaking out against assault weapons. And I actually, just before the show started, I was scrolling through the Twix, and in Harmeet Dillon's, who's I think the assistant AG, she has actually made indications that it might be her personally that's going to be arguing on behalf of the government to get rid of assault weapons bans. So either way, this is one of those. Again, we had the for the arm brace ban, where the DOJ refused to or declined to appeal the lower court decision, and so this could potentially be another case where the DOJ is actually helping the case along for the Second Amendment, which is nice to to talk about in lieu of this next part. And so
Yeah, the DOJ giveth and the DOJ attempts to taketh away.
yes. And so you know what? I thought I'd structure it this way, and we'll let Lara Smith essentially take it away, because when the all right, I am pleased to welcome back to the show Lara Smith of the Liberal Gun Club. And Lara, you and I mean, we talk a lot, but we're busy people. I've been trying to get you connected, but all of a sudden, out of the blue, my phone beeps, and it's Lara saying, we need to talk right now.
Yeah, we need to talk right now. This week's been a little crazy.
I'm just going to let you go. Just go, because we were just talking just a little bit before as I was setting the mic levels. I'm like, nope, we got to go right now. You're warmed up and ready to go. So, Lara, go.
All right. So I think probably most of the audience is going to know that now I personally think this was a leak, but somebody leaked that the Trump administration was thinking about finding a way to ban trans people from having guns. And my very first reaction to that was, I effing told you so. But the next reaction was, yeah, we know legally they can't do that, but I don't think that's what they're actually trying to do. What I think they're actually doing is floating a trial balloon of how much do people on both sides actually care about civil rights? And I'm going to point out that, just like Newsom, a whole bunch of the left in the gun violence prevention space did not stand up and go, oh, but you can't do that to trans people. And a whole bunch of people in the pro-gun space who have said a bunch of really lousy things about trans people for a while went, yeah, you can't do that. And I don't think they were quite expecting the level of, no, you can't do that. It's a civil right, that the reaction was. And I will say some people on the left who are not pro-gun have actually come out and said, oh, wait, no, that's bad. A lot of LGBTQ, those groups have come out and said, wait, no, you can't do this. And it was pretty broad across the base on both sides. So I'm glad to see that. It's kind of shocking that the NRA kind of led the charge on that. There's people who haven't said anything yet. NSSF hasn't made a statement that I've seen come out. So I'm glad that the response has been no, but I will say that I'm really disturbed on both sides. I don't think I realized how much misunderstanding there was around both mental health and firearms and what being trans is. And you and I talked about this a little bit. So there is no medical diagnosis of a mental health diagnosis of being trans. Being trans just is. And it is, being a gender other than the one you were identified at birth. And gender dysphoria is a diagnosis in the DSM-5, but not all trans people have that, and some cis people have that. So they're not the same thing. You can be trans without having gender dysphoria, and being trans is not a diagnosis. And I didn't realize how much of the response was, no, you can't do this about mental health. It's not about mental health. It's about banning a class of people. And there's a bunch of law on all kinds of different.
Actually, if I can interject real quick too. I mean, another potential avenue for this would also be various gender affirming cares. The most glaring and the one that I hear a lot in some of the more anti-trans circles that I may bump into are is that the hormones are the big reason. Oh, these people are pumped full of hormones, and as Aaron said in the last episode, is this person was a trans woman, so if they were on hormone therapies, the hormone that you're blaming for all the violence is actually being taken away. But that's aside. But still, if now we're going into, you're taking some sort of hormone replacement or some sort of puberty blockers, any sort of suppressing medication, that suddenly leads into now going into your medical records and using that as a screening method.
And I will say, as a cis woman with privilege, because I have good medical care, I'm a Gen X woman. I'm perimenopausal, and you better bet I'm on HRT. Mm-hmm. And so you're going to ban all of us. You're going to ban all the men on testosterone. All of that's HRT, all of it.
Yep.
So you can't do it. So is that going to be the class? So then the other thing I'm hearing is, well, if you have any diagnosis, then that's how we ban the firearm. So erectile disorder affects between 7 and 12% of men in the US, and that's a DSM-5 disorder. So you get a prescription for Viagra for that, and you can't get a gun. That's going to go over well, right? Like,
also, let's be honest. I mean, we had the longest war in the history of the United States with the war against terror in Iraq and Afghanistan. So we have been funneling people into those combat fields for decades, and
right.
And so the number of people that have PTSD through that, and then on top of that, there are lots of, I mean, I have so many friends and family members who also have PTSD and have never served in combat, because trauma is a thing that just happens to everybody. And so you could argue, oh, PTSD, that's, some people have linked that to violent behavior. There's a huge movement against SSRIs I need to find somebody actually who's willing to come on to talk about SSRIs, because that's a mess out there going on. But like, there are so many. I mean, I guarantee many of the people that are listening to this right now are on an SSRI medication, and you will go to blows to protect from losing that because of how much it helps you function in your daily life. And so
right. And there's all these other medications that are for mental health, right? That, like, things for ADHD, things for medications for bipolar disorders, benzos for anxiety disorders and other things. Benzos are actually, there's a bunch of research coming out of Europe about that benzos may not be addictive in the way that US medicine thought they were at these low doses. And so they're becoming these other therapies. What about GLP-1s, right? GLP-1s are technically a body chemistry changing drug, and also pretty life-saving for a lot of people. I mean, they get marketed as a weight loss drug, and they do that, but what they're for a really big number of people is to control your blood sugar.
Yep.
And to control your insulin.
My sister-in-law is diabetic and on it specifically for that. She has lost, she was actually in pretty good shape when she actually went on it. So she actually didn't lose that much weight at all from it, but it's marvelous at controlling her blood sugar.
It's unbelievable that, I mean, I know multiple people who had blood sugars that were going to cut their life short, and were doing all the things and taking all the other drugs and went on this, and it completely changed their life. Are we saying to them, you can't have a firearm? Like, it just doesn't make sense. But then I started talking to people and realizing that people really didn't realize, and by the way, this is the right and the left, and they both have the same reaction. Well, if you're mentally ill, you already can't have a firearm. And that's not true.
Mm-mm.
That is really, really, really not true. And that's not what federal law says. And I'm really concerned, I'll tell you, especially in the veteran community, that there's still this idea that if you get diagnosed with any mental illness, military sexual trauma, PTSD, anxiety, there's a whole bunch of trauma related stuff that's not just PTSD. Like, if you have any of those diagnoses, well, you can't have a firearm, and that's not true. And I really kind of want to talk about, like, so the way these laws get written is there's this thing called the Federal Register, and it has all the explanation of what this stuff is. And it's what the 4473, what the law says is you can't have a firearm. The prohibition for having a firearm is this wonderful turn of phrase that really needs to be updated. But as it's used, it's called adjudicated as a mental defective. and we can talk about the fun with that, but it has legal meaning and it's pretty restrictive. It's a determination by a court, a board, a commission, or an other lawful authority. So basically, like, it could be a court, it could be, it has to be somewhere that there's a due process requirement, basically, that a person is of marked subnormal intelligence, has a mental illness, an incompetency, a condition, or a disease, and is a danger to themselves or other, or lacks the mental capacity to contract or manage their own affairs. And it includes a finding of insanity by a court in a criminal case, and people found incompetent to stand trial or found not guilty by lack of mental responsibility. That's a really high standard. Like, people with dementia, early dementia, don't meet the standard. Like,
actually, if I could step back, a very specific case to bring up is the shooter who shall remain nameless at the Virginia Tech campus. That person was arrested, I think, a year before the shooting for stalking somebody on campus, and obviously this person was severely mentally ill. I mean, all you had to do is dip your toe into the waters of that. It's without question that this person had a lot of problems. And the judge in the case deemed that he was a danger to himself and others, specifically stated in the ruling, but recommended mental health treatment, did not sentence him to mandatory mental health treatment. And so because of that, he bought both of his guns legally after this conviction.
Right. It's this crazy, like, I, as a lawyer, I really cannot explain to people like how high a standard this is and how hard it is to be adjudicated this. Like this is not, and this isn't, the other thing about this is red flag laws are not operating under that section. Like, if you're adjudicated under a red flag law, that's not even this section. Like, that's not even this level. That's a different level that individual states have. This federal level is higher than that. I mean, some of the red flag determinations might find that, because, I mean, I do not love red flag laws, as you know, but there are people who that is the first line, and then the family's getting them into conservatorship and other, like, legal restrictions, right? Things that are happening. And that may be the first line. But even that, like, that first line doesn't reach this federal level. And so I really want people to know, and I want people to understand, you can go get mental health care and you're not going to lose your firearms under this, unless you have these other things going on. And at that point, somebody's probably already seeking to get you mental health care. Like if you are depressed, if you are anxious, if you think you have PTSD, if you suffer a trauma, and a trauma can be a whole lot of things. It can be a car accident that's traumatic. It can be loss of a job. It can be unexpected loss of a spouse or a parent, right? If you are having this, you can go get mental health care and you're not legally going to lose your guns unless there's something else going on. And this is the thing, like, I was talking to a veteran about this online, and he was saying, I know somebody this happened to. And I said, look, either there's a couple of things that could have happened. Either something got coded incorrectly, or there's more to this person, something else has happened that you don't know, or there is something really, really wrong, like something got misreported somewhere. And if that happened, if it's you don't know something, lawyer's not going to help this person. But if it's hey, look, all I did was get diagnosed with PTSD, that person needs a lawyer, because that's not legal, right? Like, I want people to know that, because I'm really worried about how all this discussion of trans people has brought this to the surface. But I also want trans people to know you can get HRT. You can get treated for gender dysphoria. You can go get treatment in the states where you can still do this, which I have issues with those restrictions at all. But if you have that treatment, you don't lose your civil right. Like, I really am worried about this also going the other way, about trans people going, well, I saw that if you're mentally ill, you can't have a firearm. And I know I have this diagnosis, so I guess I can't have one. That's not true. If you want to exercise this right, and by the way, not everybody wants to exercise this right, and I think that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to, you can. And I'm worried about this misinformation going out that you can't.
Yeah. Another great way to point out is that essentially, if you have lost your rights, as a general rule, someone is going to directly tell you that you have lost your right. I mean, if you've ever, Lara, you're a lawyer. You've probably been in a case where someone's been felony convicted, and the judge will outright say you can no longer own a firearm.
Yeah. But I want to make sure that I'm not taking, because I think the focus here is that the harm that the government is trying to do is to trans people. And I don't want to take the focus off of them. But I do want to make sure that people who are trans and people who are not understand this limit. And I think that's a really good point. The government, as of right now, the government will have told you. And we need to keep it that way. And that's what this kind of floated statement was about. How do we make it that you don't get told? Or how do we make it easier for the government to tell you this on the basis of stuff that is completely unconstitutional? Like, look, this is blatantly unconstitutional. And it's blatantly unconstitutional, not just about the Second Amendment, but about, equal protection and equal rights and just 14th and 9th and a whole bunch of other things. You cannot do this. This is the same problem as Newsom saying we're going to force homeless people to get mental health treatment. You can't do that either, right? Like you can't force these things. You can't legislate this stuff because it's unconstitutional. It's an unconstitutional restriction on people's rights.
That is true. And I will just kind of wrap us up on a bittersweet note in the fact that it does appear, since many, many, many of the gun right groups, as you said, not all, and many, many, many of the Second Amendment influencers, including some that have been extremely anti-trans and are doing this because they support the Second Amendment because it means what it says, not because they're at all supporting of trans people and their rights to be how they are. I don't agree with that, but that's their prerogative. They have a First Amendment right to disagree as much as they want. But I think that this is dead in the water. Do you think so as well, Lara?
I think as proposed it is. I think they're still going to try.
And that's why I said bittersweet. The sweet note would be, oh, it's dead. There's nothing to worry about. I think it's dead. I don't think there's nothing to worry about because number one, they tried it and this was a test balloon, and you don't set up a test balloon unless you're thinking about doing something. Two, as I was saying to somebody else, and I think this really needs to be repeated, is that obviously, Lara, you're in California, and people like Gavin Newsom have never met a gun control law that they have not been madly in love with,
right.
But yet, when Gavin Newsom does talk about gun restrictions, he will almost always, and that's every other politician with the exception of Beto O'Rourke, will lead with, I support the Second Amendment, I support the right to keep and bear arms. And even Beto O'Rourke has said that he supports the Second Amendment and the right to keep and bear arms. And then essentially give absolutely zero evidence that any of that is true. But yet, Trump just outright said this. No qualifier, no fear in his voice, or this was leaked out there. So, we need to keep our powder dry and we need to ever be vigilant.
We do. And I will say, I'm really hoping that when they decide that there's another group that they're going to try to disarm, because I'm positive that's coming. I hope the reaction from the left is louder and from the right is at least as loud.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll step back, and this is me playing devil's advocate. This is not me saying anything that I believe at all. But again, people can twist crime statistics and turn various races into dangers, quote unquote. And as we just mentioned, there's any number of medical things that you, the listeners, are engaged in right now that could be twisted into a disqualifying factor. So what was being dabbled in here was an extremely dangerous Pandora's box.
Right. And I also want to make it clear again that being trans isn't a medical diagnosis. Mm-hmm. It is a person. It is their being. And so just to say, but this is about medical, it's not just about that. That's how it got floated. That's what we're going to do. But I want people to really understand that being trans is not a medical diagnosis. And so if you're going to ban a class of people, what's the next class?
No, I think that's a fair statement. Thank you so much for coming on, Lara, and I really appreciate your insight into this. That's Lara Smith of the Liberal Gun Club.
Thank you for having me.
So I really want to make only 2 points here, and, well, no, possibly 3. First of all, I predicted something like this 2.5 years ago in spring of 2023, and they started following a blueprint very close to what I had listed, and it's an old article of mine called Canaries in the Gun Rights Coal Mine, and, I mean, I think it's good, so I think you should all read it. But the DOJ started following this print, and I'm really glad and really relieved that the gun rights organizations who, while they may not have been enemies of trans people, weren't specifically our friends either, and, that's okay because they're about gun rights, and most gun orgs do tend conservative, but I'm glad they were able to see past some of the knee-jerk ick that a lot of people have and realize the grave threat this was to the Second Amendment. And again, one of the things I said back in 2023 was that conservatives who are pushing to deprive us of our Second Amendment rights without due process are sawing off the branch upon which they sit. And so when this was leaked, I really thought that's what was going to happen. But thankfully, they saw what was going on, and they said not just no, but hell no. And, I never expected to have the NRA and the GOA and other gun orgs standing up for transgender people on my bingo card, but I am really, really happy that it happened. And I didn't know until Lara said it, Lara, that the anti-violence and sometimes pro-gun control people looked at this and said, no, don't do that. And so this is a really remarkable example of people on both sides of the political extreme deciding that this was so monstrously unconstitutional that they had to voice their objection, regardless of any other personal feelings. And so I'm glad that they did that. When this first started, I asked you about this, and you came up with the opinion that it was possibly, like you said in the interview, it was leaked as a test balloon, just to see how the voter base would respond. And I agree that that's a possibility, because if nothing else, Trump is a populist, and so he wanted to see how popular this was. There's also the possibility that someone inside the DOJ wanted to leak it, perhaps because they thought it was awful and wanted to get the public's reaction. And so, it could be something else. We will probably never know. But for most of the weekend, I was really worried about what was going to happen. And then I saw this coming together of both sides fighting it. And people have been wanting to interview me about this. And so that's been taking up a lot of my time. And then just to support this, to really bring home the fact that I'm pretty sure this is dead in the water, because again, it wasn't an actual law that was being drafted. It was just a proposal that had been leaked. There is an interview done by the Daily Caller, and this was actually before the leak happened, because this article was done Friday, August 29th. So it was after the shooting in Minneapolis, but before this was floated. And one of the reporters brought up the Washington Post school shooting database, and mentioned that there have been 4 mass shootings since 2023, which, if you ask me, is a very cherry-picked time bracket. And so, since 2 of the shooters were transgender, that's 50%. And asking if Trump thought gender ideology played a role in that shooting. And I'm not going to read Trump's response because he rambles when he talks. But the short version is he says, well, yeah, but there are other shooters who aren't transgender, and usually it's those who do the shooting. There are more... I know a lot of our listeners take exception to the word cisgender, but there are more non-transgender shooters than there are transgender shooters. And so I thought it was interesting, and it was a relief that Trump said that. And so between that and the response against this, I think we can consider it dead in the water. And I did not see this happening because I was in full doomer black pill mode about this. And so this really helped to brighten my week. Finally, the last thing I got from this was something that I guess I had sort of known, but you phrased it so succinctly and really brought it to the forefront of my brain. And that is, yeah, if you lose your rights, the government is going to make sure that you know. And I thought that was a really great thing just to reinforce that, at least at the moment, you don't secretly lose your rights. Mm-hmm. And that's also something that I looked into before I started getting help for my depression. I didn't know if I would lose my concealed carry permit. And the whole adjudicated thing, I haven't been forcibly committed, and I haven't had my case go before a judge. If you check yourself involuntarily, just checking yourself involuntarily to get help isn't going to lose you your rights. I mean, I suppose if you go in and get help and then they decide, yeah, you're a danger to yourself or others, there's that risk. But honestly, if you are a danger to yourself, you shouldn't be around them anyway. But just seeking mental help is not going to disqualify you. And so that's something that bears repeating. So I've rambled enough, Weer'd. What do you want to say about this interview?
I mean, you covered a lot of stuff, and of course, I said a lot of my thoughts during the interview. But yeah, you're totally right. I've heard sentencings in courts where they will literally say, yes, you're going to, this is a felony, so therefore you have lost the right to vote and carry a firearm. Or own firearms. And if you own any firearms, they need to be surrendered or disposed of. And it's very just standardized, and they let you know. So just seeking out help or anything like that is not going to take your rights away. And or I just saw a poll came out from Walk the Talk. And they were talking about are you worried about seeking help for mental health for red flags? And I'm like, I didn't think that was part of it. It could be actually maybe if you seeking help and a family member decided to double down on it. But I don't know. That just seems overly cruel.
Well, yeah, but I mean, with red flag laws, they could do that anyway, even if you weren't seeking help.
Correct. Yep. Correct. And they're no bueno. And and actually, speaking of red flag laws, as a parallel during Trump's first term, it was after there was a Virginia Beach shooting where the shooter very oddly used a suppressed FN pistol, and the ATF was able to figure out where he bought the pistol from, but had no idea where the suppressor came from, which is odd given one of those things is heavily federally registered, and the other one can be a lot more open-ended in its transfer and disposition. Trump mentioned offhand that he was considering suppressor bans, and also mentioned that a national red flag law might be very, very useful. And but this is just it was like an open White House meeting where the press was present. So he
well,
said,
I mean, I remember in the days after Parkland where he's sitting there with Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi, and he says, "Take the guns first, due process later."
Yep, and Pam Bondi agreed.
Yeah, and so what with Trump back in office and Pam Bondi now the Attorney General for the entire nation. The concern was real. It was valid. And so I knew that if this passed, it would not withstand judicial scrutiny because it is so blatantly unconstitutional. As Lara said, the 2nd, the 5th, the 14th, and possibly some others. But the way our legal system works is that first you have to show injury so that you have standing to sue, and then it's got to wend its way through courts. And you know that this takes time, and people are going to suffer unless you get some federal judge out there who takes a stand and puts a stay on it. And I didn't know if that was going to happen. So this is honestly the best resolution to that.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's awesome that all the groups, including some people that are very, very anti-trans, and there was definitely a few people that I was very disappointed in seeing them stand up and state that in no way, shape, or form were they standing for trans people or their rights, but they were against gun bans no matter what. But at least, again, as I said with Lara, that they have a platform that is a safe space for people that are against trans people and maybe against people in the queer community, but they're also hearing somebody speaking out against this. So even the people that aren't necessarily our friends, at least are fighting alongside us, and that's really actually kind of my big tent philosophy, why I keep saying that, the Second Amendment's for everybody. It's not a partisan issue. So therefore people on all sides of the political spectrum have the right to carry firearms. And some people are like, I don't necessarily like that because there's certain people that I don't like and they shouldn't have guns. And I just point out the fact that, hey, guess what? Honestly speaking, name any group of people, be it, BLM, Antifa, the Proud Boys, conservatives, Democrats, libertarians, socialists, whatever you have it. The vast majority of those people, even if there is a violent tendency with that group, the vast majority of them are perfectly civil and good people. And so therefore, let them all have guns. And and we'll all have guns. So when one of them decides to act out, we can take him out of the picture.
I mean, to comment on something you said earlier, when you talked about they came out against blanket bans, but not specifically, for trans people, especially if they haven't liked them, that really brings to mind that axiom that politics makes strange bedfellows, and that's exactly what this is. Yeah. We can disagree about all sorts of things, but can we all come together this one time and defend the Second Amendment and the Constitution? We can? Wonderful. I didn't think it was going to happen, to be perfectly honest. I thought it was going to be just more partisanship, and so I'm so relieved. That's why I'm so enthused about this. It's, oh my God, there's actually hope for our country. There's hope for humanity.
Yeah, and I've actually had a couple of friends that are left of center and aren't really that big into the Second Amendment community, but have reached out to me going, oh my God, I actually like what the NRA is saying. I point out, well, it's not really the same NRA as the one that you're thinking about. Because once Lane got booted, the press has been giving him a good leaving alone. It was fun when it was a boogeyman, but now that they've cleaned up their ranks quite a bit and are really straightened things out, the press doesn't really want to give a whole lot of credit for that. But yeah, no, it has definitely brought a lot of stuff, and it's actually, I wonder if it'll make some good inroads within, again, the political schism that is happening in the Second Amendment, is seeing that, oh, maybe these groups aren't quite as bad as we thought, but we'll see. They need to tread lightly before they burn up any goodwill that they have. But moving on to the second segment of the show. As you heard in the previous interview, I was calling out, I need to have an expert on SSRIs on the show. And by the way, I would still like to have a physician or a therapist or somebody that is much more clinically knowledgeable on them on the show. So if you know anybody, send them my way. And actually, I may reach out to some people to see if I can find somebody. But it turned out that completely by serendipity, Sean Sarantino and Robb Allen were sitting down to talk about just that.
Robb Allen is a musician, a computer programmer, an OG gun blogger, and a Marine veteran. But what he's most proud of is being a husband to an awesome wife and the father to 2 wonderful daughters. Welcome to the show, Robb.
Wow, you forgot about my ducks.
Your ducks? What about the ducks?
I love my ducks. I have a wild brood of Muscovy ducks that I hand feed outside of my window every day.
I've seen them on Twitter a couple of times.
I love taking pictures of them. They're my babies.
So, Robb, I asked you to come on the show because every time we see some spectacularly awful mass shooting, gun owners point out that a high percentage of mass murderers are on antidepressant medications. Gun owners like to point out the obvious, that no one who's mentally stable shoots up a school. But does it actually make sense for us to start banning gun possession for people who are on antidepressants?
Yep. I've heard this argument many times, and I always like to caution people because you got to remember a couple of things. First of all, reporting sucks. When we start talking about mass shootings, of course, they recount, 3 or more. Most of those are technically criminal on criminal. So when you start looking at true mass shootings, the numbers start getting less and less. They're not all on antidepressants. The other problem that really just gets to me is that these are crazy people, and crazy people do crazy things. A lot of us want to assign their insanity to the other party or to the other, and we're always trying to find logical reasons why they did it. But they are illogical people. Their thinking is disordered. And the one thing that all disordered thinking people try is medications or going to the doctor to get some medications so that they can feel better. So we start talking about a wet roads cause rain scenario here, where people who are crazy go to the doctors. The doctors will prescribe an SSRI right off the bat. It's one of the first things they do. And for a lot of people, it helps. But for those that doesn't, well, they continue to be crazy and go do crazy things. So I think it's a very bad marker because it's not necessarily like somebody woke up one morning feeling great, decided to pop a couple of SSRIs, and then they went crazy and went and, shot up a school. I worry about that. And there's a lot of other reasons why these kinds of statements should cause gun owners pause.
So what's the danger if we open the door to using common antidepressants and SSRIs as a criteria for making people into prohibited persons?
Because of the word you just used, common. You would make prohibited people out of people like me. Many, many years ago, I started suffering from panic attacks and anxiety. It took a long time for me to get it under control. That was decades ago. During that time, I was on SSRIs. And this was during my time as a gun blogger, as when I was a board member for Florida Carry. I was active in the community, and saying SSRIs caused this meant that people like me would have gotten caught up in that net. And I wouldn't have been able to do the types of work that I did throughout the years promoting gun rights, especially down here in Florida.
So, Robb, it sounds like what you're trying to tell me is that the people who shoot up schools are a very tiny, tiny, tiny subset of the people who take SSRIs or antidepressants.
That's absolutely correct, because SSRIs are probably one of the most prescribed medications for people who are having mental issues. And those mental issues can be all kinds of stuff. We tend to think of mental issues as people being absolutely bonkers crazy, but it could be just like me, somebody who's having panic attacks, people who are just having high levels of anxiety, people who are having stress and unable to deal with it. Doctors prescribe SSRIs. There's definitely something to be said that they're probably overprescribing them. And that, yes, that we're prescribing medications that do things that we're not 100% sure on. But the problem is, it is not a black and white marker. It's a terrible line to draw because you're going to catch a lot of people. It's about the same as a red flag law, which most gun owners absolutely abhor.
So where do you think it would make sense to start drawing the line?
Well, the line, I think, is not exactly what we want to be drawing. What we want to start looking at is the same thing that should have been looked at all this time. Because think of it this way. Every single awful mass shooting that we have seen lately, every last one of them, what does the FBI say? Say the line, Bart. He was on our radar. Right. And that's the problem, is that we're trying to find that easy button, that kill switch. We just do this and everything's fine after that. It's not necessarily a line to draw, but what it is are markers. They are flags, and there's nothing wrong with flags. There's nothing wrong with saying that if you're on SSRIs and you're doing this, those are things that get flagged, and maybe you get a little bit more look from the authorities. And then once you start reaching more and more of these, instead of just being on the radar, they should actually do the things that law enforcement is supposed to do and prove that you are a menace to society, that you are dangerous, that you should not have access to guns, nor should you have access to gasoline, chlorine, knives. The number of weapons that they can use are infinite. And so instead of saying drawing this line, start saying we're going to start paying a closer attention to the people we think could be a danger to society.
So we make fun of the police when they say, oh, we knew about this guy. He was on our radar. How many people are actually on the radar who aren't really a problem to anybody?
And this is a part of the issue with how do you police? Police, work is tricky. They have to gather their suspects. They have to look at people. They have to look at the trends of people. And so they're going to have a radar that's huge, and they have to whittle it down to the actual problem and try to focus on those. And I get it. It's difficult. It's not an easy thing. I'm not a cop. I don't know how to do all those things. Everybody wants simple solutions. So they want to say, well, just ban people who are trans, or just ban people who are on SSRIs, or just ban people who are over 6'3". Wait, what do you mean over 6'3"? Well, if you're just going to draw a random line somewhere to make it simple, you're going to catch way too much. But on the flip side, police work, like I said, is difficult. And most people don't want to go through that difficult thing of actually looking at people as individuals. Looking at statistics, people who are on SSRIs who have also committed these types of crimes tend to do other things. But then those are the ones you could focus on. It's not an exact science. You're going to miss a few every here and there. But it's a much better way of safeguarding everybody's rights while still trying to go after the criminals who prey upon society.
So it sounds like what you're trying to tell me is we can't expect human beings to be perfect, even if they're cops, even if when we look back, it should have been obvious, because we don't see the 10,000 other people that it should have been obvious to, but they never actually did anything wrong.
Correct. And at the same time, we want to not do the polar opposite of that, where we start blaming people who have never done anything wrong and we're never going to. One of the problems with casting too wide of a net is we, quote unquote, catch so many people, we lose focus on the ones who really need it. And that's the problem with just setting the line at SSRIs. You're going to catch way too many people. You're going to overload that radar that people should be on, and they're not going to be able to see because of all the noise.
All right, Rob. Well, it was great to talk with you, and I'll see you again soon.
Appreciate it.
I really like the restatement of the principle that just because you are on a medication or, we're on it and then stopped, it's not the medication that necessarily made you crazy. It's the fact that people with problems are on this medication, and people who shoot up, schools or churches or innocent people definitely have problems, but it's not after this, therefore because of this. It's just more like a Venn overlap. And yeah, we don't hear about all of the good things that these drugs are doing because they aren't sensational. I mean, it's like with airplane crashes. Flying is statistically the safest way to travel, but because a plane crash is so dramatic as opposed to most fatal car wrecks, that plane crash is going to make the news, usually nationally, and it's going to be a big deal. Whereas people dying in automobile crashes happens probably daily. And it's just become so common that we don't report on it anymore.
Also,
and so
the nature of a plane hitting the ground is hitting the water is the. I mean, I got a few years ago. I got clipped on the highway, and I don't even think I fixed the damage on the car. It actually wasn't all that bad, but I got clipped on the highway, and we exchanged information, and I just kept driving because it didn't even damage me very much. But if a plane,
you can just pull over. You can't pull over in the air.
Yeah. Or again, even if you just have a hard landing, that often means that the plane needs to be repaired a lot, or in many cases, that plane is gone, and possibly everyone inside it was too. So it does get very, very dramatic. But again, it's actually very similar to the statement above on the Daily Caller saying that half of the mass shooters were from trans people. Well, mass shooting, we're talking about 4 in 2 years. That's the rule of very, very small numbers. And it was a number of years ago, but someone was talking about the fact that the United States has more. The mass shootings are a uniquely United States problem, and this was over a decade ago. But Finland had 2 mass shootings in a not too far apart. And I did a quick calculation on the per capita and noted that all Finland needed was 1 more mass shooting, and per capita, they would have the most mass shootings in the world. And it was another mass shooting in the next 5 years. And there wasn't. They settled down, and that's all well and good. But when you're dealing with a country as small as Finland, and they only had 2 or 3 mass shootings, that is enough to stand up against, what happens even in the United States. So there's a lot of statistical games that one can play.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have an article here from CNN that is about a month old, and it's talking about mass shootings in the U.S. Fast Facts. And so it goes from 2014 to the beginning of August of this year. And so that's a much bigger spread, clearly, than from here to 2023. And so they've got the numbers, and we're not going to get into how they define mass shootings. Let's just take it at face value. And let's also take at face value the claim that over the time, well, I don't want to say since 2023, but I don't know when they were counted, but there have been claims that there have been up to 8 shooters who are either trans or gender non-binary or something like that. So let's take the least forgiving number. We'll take the biggest number. And so 8 out of, over 5,400 is less than 1%. I think it's 0.1 something. In other words, it's so small that it's a statistical rounding error. And so just counting from 2023 it's cherry picking. It's bad faith. I know we've circled back to the other topic, but again, there is the perception. There is the perception that trans people are dangerous and unstable and murderous. There is the perception that planes are dangerous and will fall out of the sky and will kill you. There is a perception that SSRIs make you go crazy and kill people. And the perception is not reality. And so look into what you're being fed, get your own facts, and then wonder why they're trying to spin it like this.
That is an excellent point, Aaron. That really is. And that is something I always encourage people whenever we're having a debate on the Second Amendment issue or anything else, is I like to tell people, look, I could give you my facts and you could either accept them or you could completely deny them because we're disagreeing. So why don't I just say, here's a couple of neutral sources where you could technically go to find, like places like the FBI or the CDC, and just have a look and then come back and tell me what the numbers look like to you. And it also means that I don't have to dig up numbers and give them to someone who might not be interested in listening. Instead, I say, go seek it out on your own. And by letting them seek it out on their own also allows them to really can look at the objectiveness of the research.
Plus, there is something immensely satisfying about just deciding not to do free labor for people.
Yeah. I got frustrated enough with like coming up, like actually giving data and things like that to people and just having them just like, nope, don't care. Like, well, good. I'm glad I did all that for you. Now I'm even more mad.
It's Brandolini's BS asymmetry principle.
That's true. That is true, which is played out in the Weird Audio Fist so often. I've got some cooked up for the future. But I think we should play us out. So, Aaron, you know who's awesome?
I am.
Aaron Paulette. Aaron Paulette is awesome. Oh my goodness. Let's bask in her glory.
It's only because you keep saying it at the top of every episode.
I mean, I say it because it's true. I wouldn't lie to our listeners. Listeners!
But our listeners are also very awesome.
Yes, we would like to thank them, each and every one of you listeners. Yep, I'm talking to you. But I do have to give some extra special thanks to our supporters on Patreon. They help keep the lights on. To become a Patreon patron, go to patreon.com/Assorted Calibers podcast to sign up. And as I say, most weeks, it's not a tip jar. We're not begging for money here. It's a shop. We sell additional podcast products like the ACP blooper reels. We got the ACP film tracks where you can watch movies with us. And we've got the ACP Mag Dump, which is the freeform show.
The freeform uncensored show.
Uncensored show. Yeah, we say potty words.
Yes, we do. Also, please remember to rate us on Apple Podcasts and Pocket Casts, subscribe to us on the platform of your choice, and share the show with your friends, both online and off.
I got a blog. It's weerdworld.com. That's WEERD world.com. And hear me weekly on Handgun Radio on the Firearms Radio Network.
And you can get more from me at linktree/Aaron Paulette. That's linktree.ee/Aaron Paulette, all one word.
And thanks to Nate Spencer for our music.
So, because I'm on antidepressants, I'm taking SSRIs, and Weer'd isn't, so far as I know. Our brain chemistry is assorted, and so is our podcast. Good night, everyone.
Good night.